What if the woman you threw away, pregnant and destitute, returned years later, not as a victim seeking revenge, but as a force of nature threatening to shatter the gilded ihwa you built on her ruins? This isn't a story about a scorned lover. It's about a mother's silent, unyielding strength and a billionaire's day of reckoning. He had the power to discard her, to erase her from his life like a smudge on a pristine window. But he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated her. And now, at the pinnacle of his success, a ghost from his past has resurfaced, holding a secret that could cost him everything. Prepare yourselves, because this is the story of how a powerful man's cruelest act became his ultimate downfall. The Vanderbilt mansion was less a home and more a museum of immense, sterile wealth. Perched atop a sun-drenched hill overlooking the Pacific, its white marble facade gleamed with an almost offensive perfection. Inside, priceless art hung on walls of imported silk, and light refracted through colossal crystal chandeliers danced across floors so polished they mirrored the silent, choreographed movements of the staff. This was the world of Ethan Vanderbilt, a man who had inherited a fortune and then, through a series of ruthless and brilliant business maneuvers, multiplied it tenfold. At 35, he was the king of a financial empire, a man whose name was whispered with a mixture of awe and fear in boardrooms across the globe. Ethan was handsome in a severe, sculpted way. His dark hair was always impeccably styled. His suits were bespoke, and his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, held a chilling emptiness. He moved through his opulent world with a languid disinterest, as if the very luxury that surrounded him was a suffocating bore. His smile, a rare and fleeting thing, never reached his eyes. He had everything a man could desire: wealth, power, and an endless parade of beautiful women who vied for his attention. Yet a profound and gnawing void resided in the core of his being. Into this cold, gilded cage stepped Maya Washington. She was 23, with warm, intelligent eyes and a quiet grace that was in stark contrast to the mansion's ostentatious grandeur. She had come to Los Angeles from a small town in the Midwest, her dreams as big as the city itself. But dreams, she quickly learned, didn't pay the rent. An art school scholarship had brought her here, but the rising cost of living had forced her to defer her studies and take on multiple jobs. The position of a live-in maid at the Vanderbilt mansion was a lifeline, a chance to save money and get back on track. From her first day, Maya felt like an intruder from another planet. She was acutely aware of the chasm that separated her world from Ethan's. The other staff members, most of whom had worked for the Vanderbilts for years, moved with a practiced invisibility. They spoke in hushed tones, their faces impassive masks. They warned her in their own subtle ways about the master of the house. He was demanding, they said, impatient, a man who noticed everything, but cared about nothing. Maya was a diligent worker. She cleaned the cavernous rooms, her movements precise and efficient. But unlike the others, she couldn't completely erase her presence. She was an artist at heart, and she saw the world through a different lens. She noticed the way the morning light hit the Rodin sculpture in the hallway, the intricate patterns in the Persian rugs, the subtle shifts in color in the sky over the ocean. And she noticed Ethan Vanderbilt. She saw the flicker of something. Was it loneliness? In his eyes when he stood for long moments, staring out at the waves. She saw the tension in his jaw as he ended a brutal business call, his voice a low, menacing growl. She saw the way he would sometimes trace the spine of a leather-bound book in the library, his touch almost gentle before his mask of indifference would slide back into place. Their interactions were minimal, at first confined to a clipped good morning or a curt instruction. But Ethan began to notice her too. He noticed the way she arranged the flowers on the mantelpiece, not with the rigid formality of the professional florist, but with an artist's eye for color and form. He noticed the worn copy of a poetry book she kept on her small bedside table in the staff quarters. He noticed the way her brow would furrow in concentration as she polished the silver, her reflection a fleeting human presence in the cold, gleaming metal. One evening he found her in the library. She was on a stepladder, carefully dusting the highest shelf. A shaft of moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing around her and catching the warm highlights in her dark hair. She was so engrossed in her task that she didn't hear him enter. He stood there for a long moment, simply watching her. In that quiet, unguarded moment, she was the most real thing he had seen in years. "Be careful," he said, his voice softer than he intended. Maya startled, her hand flying to her chest. She nearly lost her footing. Ethan moved forward instinctively, his hands closing around her waist to steady her. The contact was electric. For a heart-stopping second they were frozen, his hands on her, her wide, surprised eyes looking down into his. The air in the vast, silent library crackled with a tension that had nothing to do with business or social standing. It was raw, elemental, and utterly unexpected. He let her go as abruptly as he had touched her. "The books on that shelf are first editions," he said, his voice once again cool and distant. "They are irreplaceable." Maya stammered an apology, her face flushed. She quickly descended the ladder, her heart pounding. The moment had been fleeting, but it had changed something between them. The invisible wall that separated master and maid had been breached. After that night, the stolen glances became longer, the silences between them heavier with unspoken words. He would find excuses to be where she was asking her questions about the art in the house, surprised by her insightful answers. She, in turn, found herself looking for him. Her day brightened by the rare, fleeting moments when his guard would drop and she would see a glimpse of the man behind the billionaire facade. Their affair, when it began, was a whirlwind of secret, desperate encounters. It was a collision of two worlds, fueled by a mutual loneliness and a desire for something real in a life of artifice. In the dead of night, when the rest of the mansion was asleep, he would come to her small, plain room in the staff quarters, in that tiny space stripped of his wealth and power. He was just Ethan. And she, for a few stolen hours, was not his maid, but the only person who saw him, truly saw him. He talked to her in the darkness, his voice a low murmur against her skin. He told her about the suffocating weight of his family's expectations, the hollowness of his success, the feeling of being a prisoner in his own life. She listened, her heart aching for the lonely man beneath the ruthless tycoon. And she, in turn, shared her dreams of being an artist, of creating beauty with her own hands, of a life filled with color and passion. For Maya, it was easy to fall in love. She saw a damaged soul that she believed she could heal. She mistook his desperate need for genuine affection, his fleeting moments of vulnerability, for a promise of something more. She allowed herself to believe that their connection was strong enough to transcend the vast gulf between their lives. For Ethan, it was more complicated. Maya was an escape, a balm to his jaded soul. In her presence, the gnawing emptiness receded. She was genuine, warm, and refreshingly unimpressed by his wealth. But he was a man conditioned by a lifetime of emotional detachment. Love in his world was a transaction, a merger of assets and bloodlines. The feelings Maya stirred in him were confusing, dangerous. They threatened the carefully constructed order of his life. The affair continued for several months, a fragile, secret bubble in the cold, sterile environment of the mansion. They were reckless, driven by a need that overshadowed all reason. Maya knew she was playing with fire, but she was too deeply in love to pull away. She clung to the hope that he loved her too, that he would eventually choose her, choose them over his empty, gilded life. Then one morning, everything changed. Maya woke up with a familiar wave of nausea, a feeling she had been trying to ignore for the past few weeks. A terrifying yet exhilarating suspicion took root in her mind. With trembling hands, she took a pregnancy test she had secretly bought the day before. The 2 pink lines that appeared on the small plastic stick felt like a verdict, a life sentence and a miracle all at once. She was pregnant with Ethan Vanderbilt's child. Her first reaction was a jolt of pure, unadulterated fear. What would he say? What would he do? But then, as her hand strayed to her still flat stomach, a fierce, protective love surged through her. A baby. Their baby. This, she thought, with a surge of naive hope, would be the thing that would finally make him see. This child would be the bridge between their 2 worlds. It would force him to acknowledge the reality of their connection, to choose love over legacy. That evening, she waited for him in the library, the place where their connection had first sparked. She clutched the positive pregnancy test in her hand, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She had rehearsed the words 100 times in her mind, picturing the look of surprise, then joy on his face. She imagined him sweeping her into his arms, telling her that everything would be all right, that they would face this together. He walked in looking tired and irritable after a long day of meetings. He loosened his tie, his movements sharp and impatient. "Ethan," she began, her voice barely a whisper. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "What is it, Maya? I'm not in the mood for games tonight." Her courage faltered for a moment, but then she thought of the new life growing inside her, and her resolve hardened. "It's not a game," she said, her voice a little stronger now. She held out the pregnancy test. "Ethan, I'm pregnant." She watched his face, her breath held in her chest, waiting for the joy, the love, the recognition. But what she saw was far worse than indifference. It was a cold, terrifying emptiness, followed by a flicker of pure, unadulterated rage. The mask didn't just slide back into place. It was forged anew, colder and harder than ever before. The man she thought she knew, the man who had whispered his secrets to her in the darkness, vanished. In his place stood Ethan Vanderbilt, the ruthless tycoon, the master of the house. And he was looking at her as if she were a piece of dirt he had just discovered on his polished floor. The hope that had filled her heart moments before shattered into a million tiny, glittering pieces, like the light from his cold crystal chandeliers. The silence that descended upon the library was heavier and more suffocating than any of the priceless antiques that filled the room. It was a living, breathing thing, thick with Maya's shattered hopes and Ethan's rising fury. He didn't move, didn't speak. He simply stared at the small plastic stick in her outstretched hand, as if it were a venomous snake. The blood drained from his face, leaving his handsome features looking like a mask carved from ice. Maya's hand began to tremble, and she slowly lowered it. The words she had practiced, the tender speech about their future, died in her throat. The man standing before her was a stranger, a cold, menacing presence she didn't recognize. The warmth of their secret nights together felt like a distant, fevered dream. "Get rid of it," he said finally. His voice was devoid of all emotion, flat and sharp as a shard of glass. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. The cruelty of his words hit Maya with the force of a physical blow. She staggered back a step, her mind struggling to process the command. "What?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Ethan, this is our baby." A humorless, ugly laugh escaped his lips. "Our baby!" He repeated the words, dripping with scorn. He took a step towards her, his eyes blazing with a cold fire. "Let me be perfectly clear, Maya. There is no us. There is no our baby. There was a mistake. A foolish, regrettable mistake that you will now rectify." Tears welled in Maya's eyes, hot and stinging. "A mistake. The past few months, everything you said to me, was that all a lie? A mistake. I told you what you wanted to hear," he said, his voice laced with a brutal honesty. "You were a diversion, a pleasant if ill-advised one, but you seem to have gotten a little confused about your role here. You are the maid, a temporary employee, nothing more." Each word was a calculated strike designed to wound, to diminish, to erase the intimacy they had shared. He was systematically dismantling every memory, every whispered confession, every tender touch, and recasting them as a sordid, insignificant dalliance. He was putting her back in her place, and he was doing it with a surgical precision that was both terrifying and heartbreaking. "I won't get rid of it," Maya said, a flicker of defiance igniting within her. Her hand instinctively went to her abdomen, a protective gesture that seemed to enrage him even further. "I can't. It's a part of me. A part of you. It's a complication I don't need," he snarled, taking another step closer. He was towering over her now, his presence overwhelming. "My life is planned out, Maya. It's a life that does not and will not include a bastard child with the help." The word bastard hung in the air, ugly and venomous. The slur, delivered with such casual cruelty, finally broke through Maya's shock. The tears that had been welling in her eyes now streamed down her face. But beneath the pain, a different kind of fire was kindling. A slow burning anger. "So that's all this is to you?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of sorrow and rage. "A complication. Something to be disposed of." "Exactly," he said, his tone clipped and final. He walked over to the massive mahogany desk that dominated one side of the room. He scribbled something on a checkbook, tore out the check and held it out to her. "Here. This should be more than enough to cover the procedure. And for your silence. I don't want to ever see you or hear from you again." Maya stared at the check in his hand. The amount written on it was obscene. It could change her life, solve all her financial problems, put her back in art school, and then some. It was a king's ransom offered as payment for her soul, for the life of her unborn child. And it was the most profound insult she had ever received. She looked from the check to his cold, impassive face, and in that moment, she saw him for who he truly was. Not a damaged soul to be healed, but a man so hollowed out by wealth and power that he had lost his own humanity. He wasn't a prisoner in a gilded cage. He was the architect of it, and he would stop at nothing to protect it. With a surge of newfound strength, she shook her head. "I don't want your money." she said, her voice clear and steady, despite her tears. "I want nothing from you." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. He was not used to being defied. "Don't be a fool, Maya. Take the money. It's the best you're going to get." "No," she said, taking a step back towards the door. "I may have been foolish enough to fall in love with a man who doesn't exist, but I'm not a fool now. I will not kill my child for your convenience." His eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. "Then you are a fool, and you will leave you with nothing. You will be out of this house tonight. I will have my security escort you off the premises. Your belongings will be sent to you wherever it is people like you go." The finality of his words was absolute. He was not just ending their affair. He was erasing her existence from his life. He was throwing her out, pregnant and alone, into the vast, unforgiving city. The man who had held her in his arms and whispered his deepest fears to her was now casting her aside like a piece of trash. "You'll regret this, Ethan," she whispered. Her voice choked with emotion. He laughed again, that same cold, mirthless sound. "I doubt that very much," he said, turning his back on her and walking towards the large window, dismissing her as if she were already gone. "Now get out of my sight." The walk from the library to her small room in the staff quarters was the longest walk of Maya's life. Each step was a testament to her naivety, her foolishness. The other staff members averted their eyes as she passed, their faces a mixture of pity and fear. The news had already spread, a wildfire of whispers in the silent hallways. The maid had overstepped her bounds. The master was displeased. 2 stone-faced security guards were waiting for her outside her room. They watched her with impersonal, detached professionalism as she numbly gathered a few personal belongings: her worn poetry book, a small portfolio of her sketches, the faded photograph of her parents. She didn't have much, but these small items were the anchors to her identity, to the person she had been before she had stepped into this cold, heartless world. As they escorted her down the long, sweeping driveway, Maya took one last look at the mansion. It loomed against the night sky, a monument to a wealth so vast it could swallow a person whole. The lights blazed in the windows, but inside she knew there was only darkness, a profound, soul-crushing emptiness. The heavy iron gates clanged shut behind her, the sound echoing the closing of a chapter in her life. She stood on the curb, the cool night air, a shock to her system after the climate-controlled perfection of the mansion. She had nothing but the clothes on her back, a few personal items in a small bag, and a secret growing inside her. She was alone, pregnant and penniless, in a city that had a notorious appetite for chewing up and spitting out dreamers. Tears streamed down her face, but they were no longer just tears of sorrow. They were tears of rage, of defiance. He had taken everything from her, her job, her home, her heart, but he had not taken her spirit, and he had not taken her child. As a taxi slowed to a stop beside her, its headlights cutting through the darkness, Maya made a vow. She would not be a victim. She would not be a footnote in the life of Ethan Vanderbilt. She would survive. She would build a new life, a better life for herself and for her child. A life filled with the love and warmth that his gilded world would never know. And one day she thought, as the taxi pulled away from the curb, leaving the Vanderbilt mansion behind, in the darkness he would learn what a terrible mistake he had made. The fall from grace was not just hers. It was his, too. He just didn't know it yet. The first few weeks were a blur of desperation. Los Angeles, a city that had once seemed so full of promise, now felt like a predatory beast, its glittering lights mocking Maya's desolation. The little money she had in her bank account dwindled with alarming speed. She spent a few nights in a cheap, grimy motel, where the walls were thin and the sounds of other people's despair were a constant, unsettling soundtrack. Then, when the money ran out, she found herself on the unforgiving streets. For a time, she slept in a shelter for women, a place of last resort filled with broken spirits and shattered lives. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She was surrounded by the ghosts of what could be a gallery of women who, like her, had been cast aside by a world that had no use for them. Every day was a battle for survival, a fight for a bed, for a plate of food, for a sliver of dignity. The morning sickness was relentless, a constant reminder of the life growing inside her and the impossible circumstances into which it would be born. Yet in the crucible of her hardship, something within Maya began to harden. The soft romantic dreamer was being forged into a warrior. The self-pity that had threatened to drown her gave way to a quiet, steely resolve. She was not just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her child. This tiny, unseen life was her anchor, her purpose. It was the reason to get up in the morning, to face the humiliation, to keep going, when every fiber of her being screamed for her to give up. Her artistic talent, once a source of gentle pleasure, became her weapon. She started sketching portraits of tourists in Santa Monica for a few dollars. Her fingers, though often cold and stiff, still capable of capturing a likeness, a fleeting expression, a spark of personality. The money was barely enough to survive on, but it was hers, earned not through charity or pity, but through her own skill. Each dollar was a small victory, a testament to her resilience. One blustery afternoon, as she was sketching a young couple, their faces glowing with a happiness that felt like a world away, an older woman stopped to watch her. The woman had kind, crinkly eyes and a face that was a road map of a life well lived. Her name was Grace, and she ran a small, struggling bakery in a quiet, unassuming neighborhood far from the glitz of Beverly Hills. Grace didn't see a homeless woman begging for change. She saw the raw, undeniable talent in Maya's sketches. She saw the fierce pride in her eyes, the determination in the set of her jaw. She bought a sketch of her own, a simple, beautiful drawing of a seagull in flight. And then she offered Maya a job. It wasn't much. Washing dishes, sweeping floors, helping out behind the counter. The pay was meager, but it came with a small clean room above the bakery. To Maya, it was a palace. It was safety. It was a chance to breathe again. Grace became the mother Maya had lost years ago. She was a no-nonsense woman with a heart of gold. She listened to Maya's story, her expression hardening at the mention of Ethan Vanderbilt's name. She didn't offer pity. She offered practical advice, unwavering support, and an endless supply of warm, freshly baked bread. "Men like that," Grace said one evening, as they sat in the warm, fragrant kitchen of the bakery. "They think they can buy and sell souls. But some things, my dear, are not for sale." Under Grace's watchful, caring eye, Maya began to heal. The bakery, with its comforting aromas of cinnamon and yeast, became her sanctuary. The rhythmic, repetitive tasks of her job were a balm to her frayed nerves. She worked hard, her gratitude for Grace's kindness fueling her determination. She started saving every spare dollar, her focus singular and unwavering, to create a safe, stable world for her baby. As her belly grew, so did her confidence. She started incorporating her artistic flair into the bakery's offerings. She decorated cakes with intricate, beautiful designs, turning simple confections into works of art. Customers started to notice. The bakery, which had been struggling, started to see an uptick in business. People came not just for Grace's delicious bread, but for Maya's beautiful cakes. The day she went into labor, it was Grace who held her hand, who coached her through the waves of pain, who celebrated with tears of joy when a healthy, beautiful baby boy was born. Maya named him Noah. The name meant rest and comfort, everything she hoped to give him, everything she had found in this new, unexpected life. Holding Noah in her arms for the first time, Maya felt a love so fierce, so profound, it eclipsed every other emotion she had ever known. Looking at his tiny, perfect face, she saw not a reminder of a painful past, but the promise of a beautiful future. He had his father's dark hair and a hint of his determined jawline, but his eyes, she was relieved to see, were all hers, warm, intelligent, and full of a gentle curiosity. The years that followed were not easy, but they were filled with a richness that Ethan Vanderbilt's world could never comprehend. Maya was a devoted, loving mother. She and Noah lived a simple life in the small apartment above the bakery. It was a life filled with laughter, with bedtime stories, with the smell of paint and baking bread. Noah's small crayon drawings were taped to every wall, a vibrant, joyful testament to their happy home. Maya never stopped working, never stopped dreaming. With Grace's encouragement and a small loan from the older woman, she started her own catering business out of the bakery's kitchen. She called it the Artful Palate. Her unique combination of culinary skill and artistic presentation quickly gained a reputation. She catered small parties, then larger events, her business growing through word of mouth. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a success. A self-made woman who had built a life, a home, and a thriving business from the ashes of her past. She was strong, independent, and fiercely protective of the peaceful world she had created for herself and her son. She rarely thought of Ethan Vanderbilt. He was a ghost from another lifetime, a painful memory that had lost its power to wound her. She had something he would never have, a life filled with authentic joy, with purpose, with a love that was pure and unconditional. She was rich in a way that had nothing to do with money. Noah grew into a bright, happy, and remarkably perceptive child. He was the center of Maya's universe. She taught him to be kind, to be honest, to see the beauty in the world. She never told him about his father. The story was too ugly, too painful. She would tell him one day. She promised herself when he was old enough to understand. For now, it was just the two of them, a small, unbreakable family unit. One afternoon, when Noah was 7 years old, he came home from school with a drawing. It was a portrait of Maya. He had captured her smile, the warmth in her eyes, the gentle curve of her face. It was a work of remarkable raw talent. "Mum," he said, his voice serious, "I want to be an artist when I grow up, just like you." Maya's heart swelled with a love so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. She hugged her son tightly, burying her face in his dark hair. "You can be anything you want to be, my love," she whispered. "Anything at all." As she looked at her son's drawing, a proud, beautiful testament to their life together, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had done it. She had built her different kind of rich, and it was more valuable, more enduring than all the fortunes in the world. She had no idea that the gilded world she had escaped was about to collide with hers in the most dramatic and unexpected way imaginable, threatening to shatter the peaceful existence she had fought so hard to build. While Maya was building a life of meaning from scratch, Ethan Vanderbilt was adding more zeros to his net worth. His empire expanded his name, becoming synonymous with audacious takeovers and ruthless efficiency. He moved from one triumph to another, his face gracing the covers of business magazines, his lifestyle the subject of envious gossip columns. To the outside world, he was the man who had everything. A year after he had cast Maya out, he had married a woman named Victoria Davenport. The marriage was a strategic alliance, a merger of two powerful dynasties. Victoria was beautiful, intelligent, and as emotionally detached as he was. Their relationship was a series of public appearances and privately negotiated truces. They lived in the same mansion, but their lives ran on parallel tracks that rarely intersected. Their conversations were about investments, social obligations, and the maintenance of their public image. There was no warmth, no intimacy, no love. It was a partnership, not a marriage. They had no children. After a few years of token attempts, it became clear that it was not going to happen. Victoria was secretly relieved. A child would have been a complication, an emotional demand. She had no interest in fulfilling. Ethan, to his own surprise, felt a pang of something he couldn't quite identify. Disappointment. He pushed the feeling aside, burying it under another layer of ambition, another high-stakes deal. But the emptiness that had haunted him before had now grown into a vast, cavernous void. The thrill of the deal faded faster each time. The luxury that surrounded him felt like a mausoleum. He would often find himself standing in the cavernous library, the scene of his cruelest act, and a strange, unsettling feeling would wash over him. He would see a flicker of movement in his peripheral vision, a ghost of a memory he refused to acknowledge. He told himself it was nothing. He had done what was necessary. He had protected his world, his legacy. He never thought of Maya. Or rather, he never allowed himself to think of her. He had relegated her to a locked room in the recesses of his mind, a piece of his past that he had successfully surgically removed. He had paid for her to disappear, and as far as he was concerned, she had. He had no curiosity about what had become of her. To him, she had ceased to exist the moment the gates of his mansion had closed behind her. Sometimes in the dead of night, when the silence of the mansion was deafening, a question would surface unbidden. What if he had made a different choice? But he would quickly, ruthlessly crush the thought. Sentiment was a weakness he could not afford. His life was a meticulously curated collection of expensive, empty things. He had the best of everything, but he felt nothing. He was the king of a gilded, empty kingdom, and he was profoundly, desperately alone. Meanwhile, across the city, in a world that might as well have been on another planet, Maya's life was a vibrant tapestry of color, love, and hard-earned success. The Artful Palette was no longer a small kitchen-based operation. It had become one of the most sought-after catering companies in Los Angeles, known for its exquisite food and breathtakingly artistic presentation. Maya had a team of employees, a fleet of vans, and a state-of-the-art commercial kitchen. She had moved out of the small apartment above Grace's bakery and into a charming, light-filled house with a small garden. Grace, now semi-retired, lived in a small guest house on the property, a beloved honorary grandmother to Noah. Maya had become a savvy businesswoman, but she had never lost her artist's soul. Her success was built on the very things that Ethan Vanderbilt's world lacked: passion, creativity, and a genuine connection with people. She poured her heart into her work, and it showed. Her greatest creation, however, was her son. Noah was a remarkable boy. He was kind-hearted, intelligent, and had an insatiable curiosity about the world. He had inherited his mother's artistic talent and her warm, compassionate nature. He was a happy, well-adjusted child, secure in the unwavering love of his mother and grandmother. The ghost of his father was a silent, unacknowledged presence in their lives. As Noah grew older, he began to ask questions. "Why don't I have a dad like the other kids?" he would ask, his young face earnest and questioning. Maya would always give him the same carefully edited answer. "Your father and I weren't able to stay together, my love, but you have me, and you have Grandma Grace, and we love you more than all the stars in the sky." It was an answer that satisfied him for a time, but Maya knew that the day of reckoning was coming. The questions would become more pointed, the need for a deeper truth more urgent. She dreaded that day, but she also knew she would have to face it. One sunny Tuesday afternoon, an email landed in the inbox of the Artful Palette. It was an inquiry from a prestigious event planner, a woman known for organizing the most exclusive high-profile events in the city. The email was brief and to the point. She was planning a major philanthropic gala. The host was a prominent figure in the business world, a man known for his vast wealth and his recent forays into charitable giving. The event would be held at his private residence in Beverly Hills. The guest list was a who's who of the city's elite. The budget was, in the event planner's words, unlimited. The email ended with a simple, powerful sentence: "We want the best." Maya's heart pounded as she read the name of the host, Ethan Vanderbilt. For a moment, the world tilted on its axis. The past, which she had so carefully buried, rushed back with the force of a tidal wave. The cold library, the cruel words, the crushing finality of the closing gates. Her first instinct was to delete the email, to pretend she had never seen it, to run as she had run all those years ago. But then she looked up from her computer and saw Noah in the garden chasing a butterfly, his laughter echoing in the warm afternoon air. He was the living, breathing proof that she had not just survived, she had triumphed. She was not the same frightened, heartbroken girl who had been cast out into the night. She was a successful businesswoman, a respected artist, a proud mother. A slow, dangerous idea began to form in her mind. It was a reckless, terrifying thought, but it refused to be dismissed. What if she said yes? What if she walked back into that cold, gilded cage, not as a servant, but as a peer? What if she catered the event of the year in the home of the man who had tried to destroy her? It wasn't about revenge. She was past that. It was about something more profound. It was about closing a circle. It was about showing him, and more importantly, showing herself, how far she had come. It was about proving that his world of cold, hard cash had no power over her world of love, resilience, and hard-won success. With a deep breath and a steady hand, she typed her reply. "Dear Ms. Dubois." She wrote, her voice calm and professional. "Thank you for your inquiry. The Artful Palette would be delighted to submit a proposal for the Vanderbilt Gala. Please send over the detailed specifications at your earliest convenience." She hit send before she could change her mind. The decision was made. The collision she had both dreaded and, on some deep subconscious level, anticipated for 8 long years, was now set in motion. She was walking back into the lion's den, but this time she was not the prey. The day of the Vanderbilt Gala arrived with the kind of perfect sun-drenched clarity that only Los Angeles can produce. Maya felt a strange, detached calm as her team loaded the final exquisite creations into the refrigerated vans. She had meticulously planned every detail of the event, pouring all of her creative energy into crafting a menu and a presentation that was nothing short of breathtaking. This was not just another job. It was the culmination of her life's work, a testament to her journey. She had decided to personally oversee the event. Her lead manager could have handled it, but Maya knew she had to be there. She needed to see this through to the end. Dressed in a simple, elegant black pantsuit, her hair pulled back in a sophisticated chignon, she looked every inch the successful, confident business owner she was. The only sign of her inner turmoil was the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in her hands. The Vanderbilt mansion was just as she remembered it, an imposing, ostentatious monument to unimaginable wealth. But as she walked through the familiar, heavy iron gates, she felt not a trace of the fear and desperation that had consumed her the last time she had left this place. She felt only a cold, steely resolve. Her team worked with a quiet, professional efficiency, transforming the vast, impersonal ballroom and sprawling terrace into an enchanted wonderland. The air hummed with the controlled chaos of last-minute preparations. Maya moved through the space, giving quiet instructions, her eyes missing nothing. She avoided the library, a room she had no desire to ever see again. She had not seen Ethan. She knew he would not appear until the guests began to arrive. Part of her was relieved. Another smaller part was impatient for the confrontation she knew was inevitable. The plan had been for Noah to stay with Grace for the evening, but at the last minute her son had developed a low-grade fever and a cough. He had clung to Maya, his eyes watery, and pleaded with her not to go. Grace, ever practical, had suggested a solution. Noah could come with them. He could rest in the small private office the event planner had provided for Maya, a quiet, out-of-the-way room where he wouldn't be a bother. He had his books, his drawing pad, and his tablet. He would be perfectly safe and comfortable. Maya had hesitated, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. Bringing her son, Ethan's son, into this house felt like a dangerous temptation of fate. But Noah had looked so miserable, and the thought of leaving him when he was sick was unbearable. She had relented, telling herself that he would be tucked away, far from the prying eyes of the host and his guests. It was a calculated risk, but one her mother's heart insisted she'd take. As the first guests began to arrive, a river of couture gowns and expensive tuxedos flowing into the mansion, Maya took her place at the edge of the terrace, observing her work with a critical eye. Everything was perfect. The food was exquisite, the champagne was flowing, and the soft strains of a string quartet filled the air. And then she saw him. Ethan Vanderbilt was descending the grand staircase, Victoria clinging to his arm, like a decorative diamond-encrusted accessory. He looked older. The lines around his eyes were deeper, the set of his jaw harder. But he was still devastatingly handsome, still exuded an aura of untouchable power. For a moment, as her eyes met his across the crowded room, the world seemed to slow down. He scanned the crowd, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his guests with a familiar, bored indifference. His eyes passed over Maya without a flicker of recognition. To him, she was just another part of the scenery, a member of the catering staff he had hired to create this perfect artificial evening. The lack of recognition was both a relief and a sting. It confirmed what she had always known: she had been utterly insignificant to him. A ghost he had long since forgotten. She turned her attention back to her duties, her professionalism a shield against the storm of emotions raging within her. She was here to do a job, and she would do it flawlessly. The evening wore on. The gala was a resounding success. Guests raved about the food, the presentation, the flawless service. Maya received compliment after compliment, her poise and grace unwavering. Ethan, for his part, played the role of the gracious host, his smile never quite reaching his cold, empty eyes. He moved through the crowd, a king in his court, shaking hands accepting praise for his manufactured philanthropy. The collision, when it happened, was not the explosive confrontation Maya had braced herself for. It was something quieter, more insidious, and far more devastating. She had slipped away to the small office to check on Noah. He was asleep on the small sofa, his dark hair falling across his forehead, his sketchbook lying open on his chest. A wave of love so fierce and protective washed over her. She gently brushed the hair from his face, her touch full of a tenderness that was a world away from the cold artifice of the party outside. When she turned to leave, Ethan was standing in the doorway. He hadn't followed her. He had been looking for a quiet place to take a phone call and had stumbled upon the office by chance. His eyes, however, were not on her. They were fixed on the sleeping child on the sofa. Time stood still. The polite professional mask fell from Maya's face, replaced by a raw, primal fear. Ethan's face, which had been a mask of bored indifference all evening, was now a canvas of stunned, dawning horror. He looked from the boy's face to Maya's, and then back to the boy. He saw the familiar dark hair. He saw the strong, determined line of the jaw, a mirror image of his own. He saw the shape of the mouth, the curve of the brow. It was like looking at a photograph of himself as a child. The blood drained from his face. The carefully constructed walls of his world, the fortress he had built to protect himself from the consequences of his own cruelty, began to crumble. "Who is that?" he asked, his voice a hoarse, strangled whisper. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment of truth. The years of silence, of carefully guarded secrets were over. "That," she said, her voice shaking, "but clear, is my son. His name is Noah." Ethan took a stumbling step into the room, his eyes never leaving the boy's face. The resemblance was undeniable, irrefutable. It was a truth so powerful it defied all denial. "How old is he?" Ethan asked the question, almost inaudible. "He's 7, Maya replied, her voice cold as ice. "He'll be 8 in 2 months. The math was simple, brutal, and inescapable. 7 years and 10 months ago, he had thrown a pregnant woman out of his house, out of his life. He had tried to erase her, to erase the complication she carried. But here was the complication sleeping peacefully in his house, a living, breathing testament to his sin. The world outside the small office, with its music and laughter and polite conversation, faded away. There was only the 3 of them, bound together by a secret that had finally violently come to light. Ethan looked at Maya, and for the first time in 8 years, he truly saw her. He saw not the frightened, pleading girl he had dismissed so easily, but a strong, formidable woman who had survived and thrived in spite of him. He saw the pain in her eyes, but he also saw an unbreakable strength, and then he looked back at his son. His son. The word was alien, impossible. He had a son. A living, breathing child who had his blood, his features, his legacy. A son he had tried to extinguish before he was even born. The emptiness that had been his constant companion for years was suddenly filled with a feeling so powerful, so overwhelming, it threatened to bring him to his knees. It was a toxic cocktail of regret, shame, and a terrifying, unfamiliar longing. At that moment, Noah stirred. His eyes fluttered open, sleepy and unfocused. He saw his mother, and then he saw the tall, imposing stranger standing beside her, staring at him with a strange, intense expression. "Mommy," he asked, his voice small and sleepy. "Who's that man?" The innocent question was a dagger in Ethan's heart. He had no answer. He was a father, who was a stranger, a ghost who had suddenly shockingly materialized. The carefully ordered, ruthlessly controlled world of Ethan Vanderbilt had just been shattered into a million irreparable pieces. And in the ruins he was forced to confront the devastating truth of what he had done and what he had lost. The shock was not just her return. It was the revelation of a life he had discarded, a love he had destroyed, and a son he never knew he had. The silence in that room was louder than any confession. A father, a mother, and the son who connected and divided them stood on the precipice of a new, terrifying reality. What happens now? Can a sin, this great, ever be forgiven? Can a chasm of 8 years of cruelty and neglect ever be bridged? Ethan Vanderbilt, a man who thought he could buy and control everything, now faces a debt that cannot be paid with money. And Maya, a woman who built a world of love from the ashes of betrayal, must now decide if she will ever let the man who tried to destroy her into her son's life. Their story is far from over. This shocking collision is only the beginning. If you were captivated by this story of love loss and the ultimate reckoning, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a powerful drama. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter in this incredible real-life drama. What do you think Maya should do? Let us know in the comments below.